Hello, my name is David Leadley. I'd like to show you what's on my MacBook Pro. I have the Adobe Creative Cloud subscription, and I find that even though I don't use all of the applications, the savings over purchasing an outright license for individual apps has been really worth it. I used to purchase a suite of web developer tools from Adobe pretty much every year, and I really like their subscription model. These are some mapping tools if you want to plot GPS points along a map. This is something that I use at my day job. Our tutorial is based on the theme of a bike ride and mapping points along a map for that, so I just found these tools that were for that. Amazon Drive used to be a really good idea back when they were offering unlimited storage, and now they've dropped that down to I think a terabyte. It's no longer a good value. If you want the best value for storage, I think it's actually getting the Microsoft Office 360 or 365 subscription, because you get 5 users with the family subscription, and each user gets 1 terabyte, and it's only $10 a month. So I was disappointed that Amazon said they were unlimited for a while, and we started uploading all our files, and then they decide they're going to charge more. Android Studio is for development of Android applications, apps for cell phones and tablets. I play with that a little bit, some Hello World stuff. That's using Java. I'm excited to see the language Dart from Google. Apparently Flutter is a framework that may come to Android app development, and that would be very interesting. Of course, there's a few apps in the App Store that are only available through the App Store, but when possible, I like to download apps directly from the website of the software maker. Aquamax is a way of using Emacs. Emacs is also available as its own standalone, but Aquamax used to be one of the only ways to get Emacs on a Mac, and so you can see side by side here. The idea behind Aquamax is that they made a more integrated version, but I think that I'd actually prefer the real Emacs now. What I would usually use is Emacs on the command line, because I find that that is a little bit more comfortable for me. Control X, Control C to exit if you ever get stuck in Emacs. Atom is, I think, my favorite text editor. Audacity is open source audio management. Automator comes from Apple, and I used to play with that a little, but haven't had a need to much lately. Backup and sync, this used to be called Google Drive, and it's gotten a little confusing. I'm used to hitting Command Space for Spotlight and typing Drive, but now other things called Drive are the search result, and so I always forget that now I need to do backup and sync. And fortunately, I have a really fast hardwired connection through gigabit internet fiber from Fios here in New York. This is a cool little tool if you want to see, or spot price would be the most accurate, of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And that is available for free download on GitHub. B is a program that I paid for. It basically uses the API for GitHub and Jira, and it organizes all of your tasks into a single place. And Blender is one of the coolest programs ever. This is free 3D development here, so you can create 3D art. I used to know how to do that. I've done that in the past, but the newer versions I stopped paying attention, and one of my goals in the future is to spend some more time getting back up to speed with how to actually create 3D objects and skin them and animate them and render them. Blisk is a browser that you can use to view various previews on various devices. It's an interesting project, but because of the fact that there's already some tools, let's go to google.com. and we'll do inspect. There's already some tools that you can use to preview different devices built into Chrome, so I think that's really become less of a killer feature for Blisk. Brave is another browser. Burp Suite is cool if you're into pen testing and security. Caffeine is probably one of the most important apps that I have on my system, and that's this right here. My computer can fall asleep if I keep it in this setting, but with this setting, it disables the screensaver. It won't go to sleep. Calculator is one of those apps that never quite makes it to the #1 slot when I need to do math. I'll sometimes pop open Terminal and go into IRB, and you can do 2 times 5 divided by 3. What I like about using the command line is I'm usually already there. What I like about using the calculator app is that it can stay on top of other things. Something I really don't like about this view is that when I have multiple screens, I'll get these all lined up, and then it'll just randomly decide to toss them all over the place like you see here. And I have to really line them up again and get everything just right. So, calendar. It's a little frustrating because all of my stuff is in either Google Calendar or Microsoft Outlook. So trying to get Apple in the mix, sometimes there's conflicts, or other times I get multiple notifications. I'll accept an event invite in one calendar, and then Apple decides it wants me to accept it there too. So I try to avoid it. Now that I have an iPad Pro, I like the idea of trying to work it into my workflow, but it's mostly been a frustration. Camtasia is the app I'm using right now to record the screen, and I really like it. I've tried the trial and tried several different programs, and this one seems like a really good one. I don't know why Chrome Remote Desktop has its own first-class citizen in my applications folder. It seems like they could have done something a little more graceful, made it a menu item in their uninstaller. I don't even have Chrome Remote Desktop as a first-class citizen in my applications folder, so it's kind of a strange choice from their developers. I'm sure there's a reason for it, but that's what that is. Cloud App is another screen recording and screen capture application. We got this at work. It's a really good price right now. I think it's like $29 to get a lifetime subscription to their team plan, which offers 2 users full access to all their features. Cocktail I haven't used for a while. I believe that this lets you tweak settings on your Mac that you would not normally have access to. And Colloquy is a way to get into IRC. The one that I like the most, however, is called WeChat on the command line. This to me just feels right, and having a dedicated GUI application running just for some reason doesn't. And here's Compass. This is cool. It runs up here in the top, and it will allow you to automatically watch a folder if you're a designer and you're working with SAS or SCSS. This little menu item up here is going to give you access to sort of automate as you're editing, transpiling your SCSS to CSS, for example. And I like that it's a menu up top. Composer Cat is pretty cool. This allows you to work with your composer.json settings. If you have a PHP project, let's see here, I've got one for Easy Platform. Used to have one. There we go. So it reads a composer.json file, and it gives you basically a GUI view with some actions that you can perform, and I think that's cool. Chord is an alternative to the Windows remote desktop, and it's an open source project. Sometimes I use that, sometimes I use the native Windows version. It depends on what I'm connecting to and how well that's going at the time. And CyberDuck is the best that I've seen for a GUI for SFTP. It offers a lot of features for connecting to various services, but SFTP is the go-to, and if I'm not doing it on the command line, then I'm using CyberDuck usually on the Mac. Daisy Disk is going to look at your whole disk and give you this view where it will let you know what files are taking up the most space and which ones you can delete, and it'll allow you to do that from a central interface. If you enter your administration password, it will let you go through your whole disk and check out every corner to see what you can do to optimize. And I've actually had to use that several times because I tend to stack up a lot of files. I'm really doing good right now with 200 gig free, but most of my life I live on the edge with about 10 gig, 5 gig free, and every once in a while I have to really go through, and this really saves the day with that. Dash lets you download offline documentation, which I don't really ever much use, but it feels good to know it's there. If you're on an airplane and you're not watching the movie and you have enough battery and there's enough room and the person in front of you isn't bouncing their seat and you've got your laptop out and you're actually trying to get some work done and you need to refer to documentation, then this is the app for you. But normally I find that if I'm working, I am connected and can just refer to the online documentation at that time. Yeah, I'm very frustrated with how Apple's handling of multi-screen interface stuff has really gone downhill over the years. I work with 3 monitors at my office, and it's just the most unpredictable thing when you open an application. It's like playing one of those hand crank machines where you're not sure which one is going to roll up. Really a bad experience. Docker has a folder for these sub applications, and its main application lives out here. So that's what they decided to do there. Docker is a must-have for development, and I see no reason on a development machine not to work on Docker Edge, because I think you're not really going to risk anything by using Edge. You get really important features because it's a young product that really needs the latest updates to, get past some of the issues and get some of the features that you want. So I think it's important to set yourself to that channel. I'll let that start up in the background as I continue so that I can show you. Here we go. Here's an update. So while that's loading, DVD player is, I think, irrelevant because there isn't a DVD drive on any modern Mac that's portable. My iPad doesn't have one, my MacBook Pro doesn't have one, my MacBook Air doesn't have one. I know you could buy a drive to plug in, but I think DVDs are pretty much obsolete, so I guess that's just there because the upright iMac, it's been a while, the upright iMac will have that side slot, but I think that's going away too. I think we're mostly just digital files now. So we'll relaunch Docker and let that go in the background. Eclipse is, I think, something that everybody should be familiar with. Some projects or plugins are only in Eclipse, and some things are based on Eclipse, so it's good to be comfortable and familiar there. It's certainly not a tool that I use on a regular basis, but I think it's a good one for you to know if you're working with code in any way. Okay, so we've got Docker here, and it now has Kubernetes running inside of the development version on the Mac. If we look at the preferences, Kubernetes has its own tab here, and the way that you select, let's see, I thought you could select the advanced here. Okay, experimental true is where, under the daemon, basic, check experimental features, and you're going to get more than you would otherwise. So I'll replace the old version of Etcher. If you wanted to run something on your Macintosh like Kali Linux, you would use Etcher to put that onto a thumb drive and then stick that inside and boot to that when you're ready to use that system. FaceTime I've never really gotten into. I use mostly Hangouts or Skype and other tools for work. Firefox Developer Edition has a cool blue icon. I never really take advantage of anything different than Firefox, so it just sort of becomes yet another Firefox if I don't want to clear the cache or want two of them up at the same time. There are distinct differences, though. I think it's got some IDE features for developing Firefox apps, but I don't know if there's any advantage unless that's what you're doing. I'll have to check that out more. I don't really use FontBook, however, I know it's doing stuff under the hood. I do use Sky Fonts, and that's how I get my fonts into this system. And that will sync from Google Fonts and some others, I believe. So I only really run that when I'm in the act of using fonts that aren't normally available. Franz is usually the tool that I have open during my work day. This has access to all of my Slack channels that I want open during my working hours. Instead of using the actual Slack app, it also has access to Gmail and several services all in one place. So I can work with my Twitter account and then switch to my work Slack, and that's a really good system. Fuse, I just recently heard about this. We had a video conference with some partners, and this was the app they chose, and it was very good. I've been very impressed with Zoom lately. However, this one might be slightly better quality. Could have been just a good day for them when we tried it, but that's exactly the kind of thing that I would expect, is that you have a lot of good days, and so far I've seen at least one with Fuse. Oh no, no games. GarageBand, I used to spend a lot of time in there, and not so much lately. I got a Gear 360 recently, so I'll try to share some as I learn about that, but it's the first version, so no live broadcasting. And when I tried installing this app for editing 360 video on my MacBook Air, it told me there was something wrong with the graphics support. I couldn't run it, so I haven't tried it on this machine. Well, let's try it right now. Check the product key on the sticker. And I have that, so I could enter it, but I would need to stop the recording so you don't also have that number. So I'll do that later, but it looks like this one will support it. This is a MacBook Air 2016, so that's cool. I'll try to play more with the 360 video there. GitHub Desktop is something that I want to love, but there's been so many bugs and issues with it, and they've changed their interface style so that you're not really using the same terminology for the actions that you're performing. So really, I do all of my Git stuff on the command line because it's been too confusing, and I'm worried when I click something that says sync that it's doing several actions and I don't know what those are. I could probably spend some time to iron that out with a test repo, but so far I haven't really been motivated to try that. Gitify and Git Scout, this is what happens when you Google things like Git GUI alternatives and download everything available. Neither one of them have gotten my attention very much. Gitter I like a lot because it integrates with your GitHub projects, so you can communicate with people that might not otherwise join a Slack chat or things like that. And you also see activity in the room dedicated to that repository that helps you to understand a little bit better at a glance the state of the project, the most recent activity, and what's happening there. Chrome is, of course, the default browser that I use for everything. And here's the Google Drive link, this tiny icon there, the symlink. It points back to what is now called backup and sync from Google. And for some reason, because I guess it's a symlink, or an alias rather, that doesn't show up as one of the search results when I hit Command Space and use Spotlight, like I was saying earlier. Google Photos backup is good, but I don't let it run all the time. Basically, every photo that it sees added to your machine, it'll upload to your Google Photos account. And this is a cool open source project. Since I have the Google Play Music subscription for the family, this is a fun way to have that running down in the dock and be able to switch back and forth in control, and it runs a little icon up top as well. GoToMeeting is here just in case we have external people that we need to meet with, but I don't ever use that anymore. GPG Keychain. This is a way that you can do open source security for your emails, encrypting your emails, and sharing trust and authentication in an open manner. You have no reason to believe that an encrypted email is from me unless you've seen that I share my public key with you in advance, and you know, oh, okay, this was the public key that was used to encrypt this email, and then you know, okay, this is who sent it. So it's not really meant to prove that I'm me. It's simply meant to prove that I'm the same person that I was the last time I sent you that key. But once we've exchanged keys, the encryption factor is very good to have an open source encrypted email. If you need to send somebody a copy of your passport or your social security number, you might ask them, hey, please use GPG and we'll use secure email. Of course, there's a lot of other options, but so many people are like, well, just send me a PDF unencrypted, and you never know whose hands that falls into. So this is a good, important thing to have. Grammarly, I think, is nice. It seems like the same thing I would expect from any spell checker, but just a little smarter. And this is, I think, a very important app because I work with time zones all the time. It does show me real, like, human time here, but it's got internet time with swatch beats, which I think still has a lot of value to the internet if people will just adopt it. So yeah, that's in the corner up there, and I actually do refer to it. Once you live with it long enough, you start to get a feel for this 1,000 beat cycle that's constantly rotating, and you can kind of tell as you travel a sense that time itself isn't shifting around as much because you're oriented to this beat that never changes here. I've played a little with iBooks Author. I haven't written any books in it yet, but I think it's cool that they made the app. Image capture, iMovie, these are some basic apps. iMovie is actually pretty powerful. In fact, for green screen backgrounds, so far it's been the easiest and best at erasing the back because it not only lets you choose the color, it also lets you do a little scrubbing around there, so there's tolerance for things like shadows and stuff. Insomnia is a sort of alternative to Postman. I use Paw. I paid for a subscription to Paw, but Insomnia also does REST API testing. And IntelliJ IDEA, if someone tells you you have to use PHP Storm or WebStorm, and you feel pressured into giving them money, check this out first, because probably the reason that people are so excited about owning PHP Storm or WebStorm is some of the plugins that are available. So here's the IDE. You can download the third-party plugins and use them if that's what you're after. I'm not saying there's no value to the paid products, but if you are feeling like you can't justify the expense of purchasing full product, this does exist. So for example, with Dart, the language from Google, you can do a lot of editing and use all the workflows that are built into the plugins for WebStorm, and you don't have to pay for WebStorm. I think that's really important to the open source community, that we never get stuck in the corner with a paid app and rely exclusively on that. Here's iTunes, which I never use anymore. I used to back when we owned our music, but now I use the music subscription through Google. Kaleidoscope is, I think, the best diff tool if you want to see two documents side by side and actually understand what's different. I think their interface has really done the best job with that. And Keynote I use at work a lot. I also use PowerPoint, and it really just depends on what my starting files are. If I'm using a deck that was built in Keynote as my starting point, then it'll probably come out in Keynote as well. Kitematic Beta comes in the family of Docker tools. Here's Kitematic Beta. So this probably is leftovers from the fact that I've installed Docker over the past many months several times in several ways, and it's probably landed there as one of those. I don't remember what command it does. Oh, okay, IRC. That's cool. Probably one of those apps I downloaded and meant to try and never did. OpenKomodo used to be a really cool tool. Now it feels kind of strange. I'm not sure why it doesn't feel normal. Maybe the fact that it started up with that flash of white and then stretched itself out slowly. It just doesn't feel like a solid modern tool anymore. Kind of strange. But it's there, and I used to use the previous version quite a bit. Another tool that everybody's calling by the same name, Launchpad. So this is actually macOS native UI stuff, and that's kind of cool to see that view. In fact, we could have been doing our tour this way instead of going through the apps folder. But that's something that I also pretty much never use. I have an LG phone, and even though it's not the one that I have connected for my main telephone, this is actually a really powerful device, the LG V20, and this is the companion app that goes with it. In addition to having an IR blaster that lets you do remote control of your devices like your air conditioner and your TV, it also has high quality audio recordings, so when I go out and want to record audio, that's something that I can bring with me. And here we have LibreOffice in addition to OpenOffice. I almost never use those, but I like the idea and it's fun to keep up with the latest. LiveCode, something else I never use but kind of wish I would. I think HyperCard meets Visual Basic. It's got a really good idea behind it. It's just never been something that I've really stepped out and used myself. And this, I believe, is similar to this other tool that we had up here, Etcher. So I'm not quite sure what the difference is. I'd have to get into that and play again. Multiple tools there intended to let you experience Linux on your computer. And MacBooster is one of those apps that feels like they're just trying to get your money, like shareware, and constantly pressuring you to buy, but I found that they really do offer some value. When I run that, it's going to do several tasks that I would have done manually, but it's going to automate that, and it also adds a few kind of cool bells and whistles. So, I've paid for a copy and I like it. I do recommend it, but be aware they're going to use the high pressure sales tactics. For example, scanning your system for dangerous things that aren't really dangerous. A cookie from a website, for example, might give you a big red exclamation point, and you could think, oh no, I've got a virus. Well, it's just hyping things up. You don't really have to worry. However, it is nice to tweak the settings to what you want and then run it every once in a while just to kind of keep your system optimized, keep cleaning out some files that you don't need to have in there and stuff. This is a GUI editor for Markdown. I like it. I use it sometimes I use Dillinger on the web because it just feels more convenient than opening an app on this computer. I do like Apple Mail. I use Outlook for work, and that's just for work, so Mail has all my accounts logged in to one place. And I never use Maps. I've heard bad things about it, and I use Google Maps anyways, so I don't see a need for this to exist. Don't really use Messages. I do pay for an Office 365 Well, I don't know if it's 360 or 365. We'll say 365 and check later. All of these apps are essential working in the business world. You're going to eventually need to open Microsoft Word files with an actual copy of Microsoft Word, and I think that they offer a lot of value. Like I said earlier, you get 1 terabyte of storage for every user, 5 users, in a family subscription for $10 a month. That's really, even just for storage, that's a really good price. And of course, Minecraft. Minergate, I was experimenting with. I don't know if it's for real or not. I definitely know it makes my computer work super hard, but it keeps saying that there's pending, I guess, mined coins, and it never actually, credits them to my account. So I'm not too pissed off about that because I haven't been running it night and day for weeks and weeks or anything. But it does make me wonder, does anybody actually ever get credited for the coins that they've mined? The ones that I've mined so far are probably worth about 50 cents, so it's not really that big a deal. However, I'm curious, is this a real deal, or is it someone that's actually banking those coins from the people like me that try it for a little while and then give up? Mint has a quick view app up at the top of your screen. That's really useful if you use Mint. I do, and I think it's worth it. They've got a really good interface to unify all of your financial stuff together. Here's Mission Control, an app from Apple, basically the interface that pops things down like that. Now I like to use 4 fingers to swipe up and down. 3 fingers does that as well, but for some reason I got in the habit of 4 fingers, and that seems to work for me. I guess less chance of failure if my fingers aren't lined up right. Mountain Duck comes from the same people as CyberDuck, but never really gotten into using that. MySQL Workbench is a really important tool. It's not only letting you work with SQL queries, but also administer the server. The only trick is that this is on your computer, and it's likely that your MySQL server is on a remote machine. So make sure that as you try to connect the two, you use SSH. If you're using SSH to log into the remote machine, configure MySQL Workbench to also log into the remote machine through SSH. That way you're not having to punch open a port to give it remote access to remotely administer your MySQL instance. You're actually logging in through this GUI, and it then will do command line commands to administer remotely. NetBeans is my favorite IDE. I've used it for many years. When I got sick of Dreamweaver losing all of my sites that I'd configured, I went looking for something that was not a WYSIWYG editor, that just offered a lot of good features to edit plain text, and I landed on NetBeans. They've had PHP support for many years, which has been my main language, and they're how I found out about the existence of the Symfony framework. As I was looking through plugins, when Symfony version 1 first came out, they had a plugin for Symfony, and I saw that, downloaded the framework, and kind of picked apart its code to get inspiration for some of the frameworks that we were building back then. And that was a really fun experience to now work with Symfony on a daily basis at my day job, and to have heard about it through this back channel many years ago. Network Remote is one of my favorite apps. This guy wrote a Python app for OS X, and it allows you to connect to your TiVo and control it from your Mac. In fact, there are keyboard commands, so if I hit the letter G, over there on my TiVo, the guide came up, and I can use page down and page up and hit enter, and there's Futurama over there. So that's a really cool feature, to have your laptop control your TiVo, if you have a TiVo. I bought one used from a friend of mine, and I'm really glad I did. Alright, so Notes I use on my iPad. I'm not going to open it because it might have secret stuff there, but I'm assuming that there's some kind of synchronization. I haven't actually tried that yet. I only use it on my iPad, so after I'm done recording, I'll check that out and see maybe it synchronizes to the Mac as well. I forgot that numbers even existed. I sometimes use Excel, but almost always Google Sheets, and I've started using Airtable, and I think there's actually an app for Airtable. I forget what this does, but here's a reminder of who does it. I also don't remember what this does. Oh, and it's the same thing. It looks crypto related, like Stellarium. Okay, I'm going to take a break because this is a lot of sitting down. So this is Omni Outliner. It's been my favorite app for many years to make lists. It's not free, however, and there is a tool that I've been using more called DynaList, and that seems to be pretty much the same stuff that I liked about Omni Outliner, so that's kind of taken the place of that for me. This is OneDrive. We've switched to using this at work from using Box before, and I think it's a lot better. For my personal stuff, I use Google Drive, though. Here's OpenOffice. I don't really touch that much, but it's nice to have. Opera, I think they do cool things, but my daily driver is still Chrome for sure. I never really use Pages. Most of my docs are Google Docs, and if they're not a Google Doc, then it's a Word doc. Patterns lets you play with regular expressions. This is very important if you're trying to test that regex that you've written will actually behave as you expect. And PAW is a really great tool. If you're working with REST APIs and you're on a Mac, this is the tool that you should be using. It's got a cloud feature so you can synchronize across your devices, which is good because I have a work machine and a home machine and I want to be able to use the same files and the same tests on both machines, and that's really good. Pharo, not quite sure yet if I'll use Pharo or Smalltalk as my main environment for Smalltalk, but here you can see Pharo. It's basically a Smalltalk environment, and if you want to play with that and play with Squeak, that's something that you could maybe give me your thoughts on which is better. I know that Pharo does a few things differently. Not really that much into Smalltalk to the point where I would see the distinctions yet, though. There's Photo Booth. I usually open this and take a selfie right before I do a meeting, and that's the only thing that I really use it for. So here you can see some various meetings that I have been in, including a different backdrop that I've got from work here. So that's pretty much the only thing I use Photo Booth for. It's a quick way to test that your webcam is looking at the right things. I don't really use Apple Photos, but it volunteers a few times when I don't really want it to. I use Google Photos, and I wish it would stay out of the way a little bit more. PHP Storm is what mostly everybody that I work with uses. I try to use it as much as I can, but I find that when I really want to focus on my thoughts and not on the interface, that I'm in Atom, in just a plain text editor, or in Emacs. Postman is what most people use to test REST APIs, but I think if you try PAW, you're going to see that it's just a much better experience. Preview, of course, for viewing pictures and PDFs. And Prezi, I think it's a really great system if you want to have really impressive alternatives to PowerPoint. It's sort of like doing a fly-through on an infographic, but you're the one that's creating the infographic. So if you have a presentation and you want it to really pop, you can check out Prezi. I tried to renew my private internet access subscription, but there was just the wrong timing with the wrong people, so I found other solutions. And Privoxy runs under the hood. It basically is a proxy that all of your traffic can go through so that you've got control over what's happening on your machine. Processing is another sort of visual programming environment. And QuickTime Player is pretty powerful if you want to do a screencast. You won't have this effect of your camera recording at the same time. However, if you don't have a screencasting tool, this is the one that you can reach for on your Mac. Reminders, I assume, are synchronized with my iPad Pro, but I haven't used it on the desktop. I just used that on my iPad. And Ring is a cool alternative to Skype, except nobody else is using it but me, so I don't really get a chance. Safari, I think Apple does an okay job making a browser, but I never really use it except to test and make sure that the stuff I'm working on looks the same. And ScreenFlow was a consideration when I actually purchased a Camtasia license. However, the fact that I can use my Camtasia license on my Windows machine as well was definitely what I wanted out of a screen recorder, so that's something that really tilted the scale for me. Screen Hero, I think, is no longer a thing, but it was really cool when it was. It lived up in the top bar and basically gave you some very powerful screen sharing functionality that I couldn't find anywhere else. So I was sorry to see that go, but it's now integrated into Slack, so I guess that's supposed to be a killer feature why you should use Slack, because you get that functionality now. SQL Pro, if you're using MySQL Workbench and it feels a little heavy, SQL Pro is a very lightweight sort of tabular view of your database. It's a very fast tool to work with SQL, with MySQL or MariaDB. And I've turned off Siri because I don't want all of my devices answering when I speak. My iPad has Siri, so I can say those words that if I say now would trigger, and that one device is listening. And I don't really use Sketch. Sky fonts I use only when I need fonts. And Skype for Business and Skype, I don't know why they decided to go with two products. Probably some legacy stuff. They're probably going to merge into one product in the future, but you have to have both if you've got multiple accounts and need to connect through various channels. Slack is, of course, the ubiquitous form of communication for business these days. I'd like to see more people going through Gitter and definitely back to IRC, but it's a must-have for most daily interactions. And Smart Switch is an app that comes with the Samsung Galaxy family. So even though it says Smart Switch, you can really use it for more than switching from one phone to another. It's basically the native app on your desktop system that lets you connect to your phone. Socket.io Tester is a tester for working with Socket.io if you're in JavaScript and you use WebSockets. Solver is pretty cool. Let's continue to Solver. So if I say I had 2 apples and now I have 3, that doesn't do anything, but if I change that to 2 and 3, my total is 2 plus 3. You can see it's grabbing the numbers out from the sentences, and if you know how to use it properly, which apparently I don't, you can get it to do some powerful numbers crunching on the side while you're working on thoughts. I want to love SourceTree very much, but they just cannot seem to get their authentication working properly, so I've abandoned it and I just work on the command line now. it's a great idea, but when you constantly have to enter your password, re-enter your password, reassociate which SSH key is there, and then look in your .ssh folder in your home directory and see 12 keys that it has generated on its own because it thinks you're doing this for the first time, it's unusable until they fix their key management and authentication system, and that's really sad. I wanted to love Bitbucket, and I'm more and more using GitLab. That was a recommendation from some coworkers, and I see why it's becoming more and more popular because they're just making quality software, and that's not what I find with SourceTree. Everything else would be wonderful, but that one killer anti-feature is what really seals its death there. Speed test is cool because instead of just going to the speed test website, you have it right here in your upper menu there. So you can see a live speed test from my FiOS connection here. And this is actually a pretty slow day apparently. But yeah, if you want that in your menu bar up top, that's not something I run all the time. I like to keep it clean. Even though I have 16 gig of RAM, it's really nice to keep things as fresh as possible. I only have the Spotify app because I used to have it, and a lot of other people use it, and when they share a link, it's nice to be able to catch that. And here is Squeak. When I showed you Pharaoh earlier and talked about the alternative, Squeak is a small talk environment. It's got more of a kid's feel to it, but it's just as powerful for sure. I would want to really understand the distinctions between Pharaoh and Squeak before I would make a judgment call on which is better, but both are available and they're both free. So this appears to connect to my Gear 360 camera. Steam, of course, for games. Solarium gives you a 3D view of the night sky. I need to allow it. So the cool thing in here is that you can fast forward and rewind through time. And as you drag around the night sky, you can see where all of the stars are, and the moon, and the constellations. And you can get information about everything. So this is just a really fun app in general. Stickies, Sublime. I'm not sure why I don't use Sublime much. Atom just seems to be the right way to go. I think Sublime Text, unless you install plugins to manage things, expects you to write all of your configuration by hand in a JSON file, which is fine, but Atom really has a better system for discovery and installing plugins. Tableau is data visualization. It's a commercial product, but they have this public viewer app, and that's pretty cool. Telegram is a really great communication system. It's really popular in the cryptocurrency markets, and so you'll see a lot of references to Telegram in those. And TextEdit, I actually still open sometimes just to quickly save something, because most text editors these days want to reopen the last file you had open or the last set of files. And it's kind of nice to reach for something that you don't use for work so that you can just have quick notes to yourself, and so sometimes I'll do that. And let's see, texts is, I guess, just a simple text editor. I thought it was focused on something like Markdown or, nope, I guess like RTF. Editing, okay. The unarchiver you probably have already. You have to have that to open a lot of files. Time Machine, never really got that to be part of my workflow. I assume it's doing something under the hood a little, because if I delete something on my desktop and hit Command Z and come right back, that's probably not Time Machine doing that. I used to have a drive plugged into my computer all the time, and Time Machine would do the backup system, but really with cloud backups, I don't think about that much anymore. Tor browser, of course. Transmission, this is another SFTP app. And some utilities, I don't think anything's unique in there. Versions was a wonderful app back when anybody used SVN. And VirtualBox, of course, is still a very powerful tool, especially if you have enough RAM and processing power to comfortably use Linux in an environment on your computer. This is something that we actually still use at work for training. Even though Docker is around, it's still a pretty young product, and VirtualBox just gives you that nice, clean experience. However, more and more, instead of opening up a VirtualBox instance, I'll create a DigitalOcean droplet, and that allows me to have a dedicated and disposable environment that I can work from and share with other people. VirtualBox, of course, is stuck on my machine. A DigitalOcean droplet can be spun up in under a minute, and I can point my DNS to that and instantly have a canonical domain that I share with other people, and I think that's really the way to go for most of my needs to run a discrete instance of an operating system. Viscosity is for connecting to VPNs, and here we have Visual Studio Code, and something surprising, there's a full Visual Studio for Mac OS now. And it will allow you to write C# programs that target Windows. So I was pretty impressed that they reached out to the Mac community for developers to actually download this for free and develop to target Windows systems. It appears to be taking a while. So yeah, here it is. Here's a C# Mac app, a Visual Studio Console app, F#. Pretty impressive that they really put that much energy into the Mac community. VLC will allow you to play all different kinds of media files that you might not otherwise be able to. This is my go-to VPN. I love being able to choose the country and city and say, I was recently in Spain and I wanted to do some things inside the United States just to feel comfortable that my data is closer to home. From Spain, I selected the New York endpoint, I guess you'd call it, and all of a sudden I'm in New York from Barcelona. That was a really good feature when you're traveling and you don't want your data wandering around through who knows where, but also if you're in a coffee shop and you want to make sure that no one's able to watch your traffic. Speaking of watching people's traffic, here's Wireshark. They make a really good free open source app that lets you watch the traffic on your network. We skip down a little, but I'm currently using the Wacom Bamboo tablet and pen, and it feels very comfortable in my right hand, and then often I'll use my left hand for the touchpad or mouse, and having that combination, it feels like I can be pretty productive. WeatherBug is actually pretty cool how it's got this little menu item. It gives you the forecast and the weather map at a glance, so I like having that running most of the time. I usually clean it up when I'm doing a recording though. Wire is another communication tool. And I haven't really used it, so we'll see what that turns into in the future. Wireshark, talked about that already. Workspaces is very cool. Amazon will reserve a Windows instance for you. It doesn't do anything until you call it back to wake it up. And from any machine on your tablet or on your cell phone, for example, I can plug this into a little hockey puck type thing that turns this into a full computer, the Samsung Galaxy S8 Plus. and it connects to a monitor with HDMI, and it has workspaces, so all of a sudden then you've got this Windows instance running remotely. Of course, it depends on the speed of your machine and the network stability and speed to have a good experience there, but if you need to do anything with Windows, AWS offering this workspaces feature is really powerful, and it can be a solution for testing especially. Xamarin is basically the mono environment that now is merging into the Visual Studio suite of tools, so I don't know how much longer that'll be around. But yeah, it went mono for .NET development on non-Windows machines. Then they called it Xamarin, and then now there's an actual full Visual Studio environment for the Mac. And of course, Xcode. Using the YubiKey, I have several, and I've been trying out different ones. I think my favorite so far is the Neo. That one has the NFC that I use with my cell phone. But I also have the little Nano, and I have several other devices. Just been playing with that lately to see what my favorite workflow is. But this allows me, when it's plugged in, it allows me to log in with one hand using the number pad, as opposed to having to type out my long, complicated password every time I want to unlock my screen. ZenMap is a really good GUI. It used to be frustrating because it runs in X11, but it's pretty comfortable to run quickly now. The only thing to keep in mind, and let's see, there was that key again because I've got my YubiKey plugged in. The thing to keep in mind is that you've got a couple of icons down here, and one of them is the X11 instance and the other one is the actual app. So if you quit one, it's a roll of the dice if you're actually quitting the one that will kill it or not. So probably the best thing is to come up and actually quit the one that you're in. So other than that little frustration, running Nmap can be really challenging with all the command line flags and everything. So having ZenMap can really help you to build the proper sequence if you want. And Zoom, this has been the go-to webinar and web conferencing tool that our company has been using for a while now. I think last year we switched to this, and it's really been a lifesaver, having something that you can rely on pretty consistently. We do have problems with it, but for the most part this is something that we can really count on when we need to do video conferencing. So that's everything in my application folder. Whew, that took a while. Thanks for checking it out. Let me know if you have any questions. I'm happy to show you more details. If you're curious, if you couldn't hear something I said and you want me to repeat it, and I can talk to you in the comments. And probably done for now. I was thinking about showing some things that I use inside of the browser, but let me just show a few screens here. Google Keep is really good. OnlyKey, another security device, it's got a good workflow. HelloFax is a lifesaver if you want to have a fax number but you don't like faxing, and you can just let it sit there off to the side, and that's really good. VNC in Chrome is kind of nice. Postman in Chrome is kind of nice. I love UberConference. If you don't want to force people to download stuff and sign up for something, but you want to have a video conference on the internet, UberConference is really good. It lets people dial in, use their computer, share screens, very powerful. And HelloSign, I think it's my favorite for signing documents. I've used several different ones, but that one, along with HelloFax, I think they've got a really good product. So yeah, that's all I'll do for now. All right, see you later.